Everybody to a special meeting, an emergency meeting of the Kaufman County Commissioners Court. Today's Friday, February the 27th. It's 10 o'clock, and we are a little after 10 actually, and we'll begin our meeting now. And we will pass over the opening ceremonies and enter right into the business at hand. I do appreciate everybody being here today on a short notice, and this is an important subject for us as a county to handle. So item number one is pursuant to Texas Government Code 551-045B1, review and consideration of any proposed contract assignment or letter agreement for ambulance services for Kaufman County with East Texas Medical Center, Care Flight, or any other related entities for the remainder of the 2015 and or fiscal year 2015. The court may discuss all matters related to the ambulance service program with East Texas Medical Center and Tyler as it relates to the cancellation of their existing contract at Kaufman County. The court may also review and authorize one or more persons to finalize specific terms and conditions of any agreement for ambulance service for the remainder of 2015 and our fiscal year 2015 that serve to minimize the imminent threat to health and safety to the citizens of Kaufman County, Texas. And I believe, just for history, that's the longest item I've ever seen on an agenda. So mark that down. And compliments of Mr. Long. So, gentlemen, well, I guess if it's all right, we'll just let our attorney, from the district attorney's office, make the presentation.
I appreciate that. I think that Steve Huey is the ability to make a presentation, and if he has questions or comments, I'll come assist with that. Steve.
Thank you. Judge, Commissioners, since all this occurred, when we first got the notice that East Texas was going to withdraw from the county, they wanted to assign their contract to Care Flight. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but John said that that's not in the contract. So what I did, along with some others, is we have talked with Care Flight and come up with a separate, completely voluntary agreement with Care Flight to take care of the interim time period between now and the end of the year, so that it will allow us time to do a proper RFP and look at all of our options and all of the people that could serve us. So, and excluding anything that, John wants to do, because he's the attorney and I'm just an old former fireman. So I would recommend we go with Care Flight pursuant to the language and everything that John and Care Flight have or will agree to.
And I think that in the negotiations...
John, may I, do we have representatives here from Care Flight? I know we do. I think I saw.
We have Jim Schwartz, the
Chief
President,
CEO. Is anybody here from East Texas Medical?
No, sir.
Okay. I just wanted to see.
A couple of observations. The first observation is that both the emergency itself as well as in the agreement, I wanted to reflect that the emergency was brought on by East Texas Medical Center. It's not by something this court did or failed to do.
Who that microphone? Let's go closer.
Yes, and the cause of the emergency was completely outside of the Commissioner's Court itself and any action that it had taken or failed to take. And that's reflected both in the notice today and also in the agreement. The second thing I wanted to tell the court is that the terms of the agreement have really been hammered out with Steve, and something I would want the court to know, as well as the public to know, is that it's caused a review of the response time and other particulars of a 20-year-old agreement. Frankly, it's been vastly improved from what we had before to what we have today. And so, if nothing else, this is a serious upgrade in the service that should be provided to the citizens. And that's, I guess, the good news to come out of the bad news, is that Care has been cooperative through the negotiations. We had different requests that we wanted as part of the contract, and I think this has been accommodated. And the last one that I was aware of was just a venue provision to ensure that venue for any disputes is in Kaufman County, since it's required under state law. I think that was going to go through. Mr. Schwartz is here, and I think he's seen the different revisions that have been suggested, and I think he's in agreement. And it will give us a chance to look at carefully and also to allow us to put this whole process through an RFP this upcoming budget cycle and see what we want to do as a next step.
Okay. Commissioners, y'all have any question of Steve or John?
I've looked through this contract pretty well, John, and have we paid East Texas Medical for our county employees' dues? I know we were going to pay CareFlight for our dues starting in March. Is that not
I
correct?
can answer that. The county has paid East Texas. They said they will reimburse the county in a prorated share what we have paid them. On the other side of that, CareFlight has agreed to take in our county employees at a rate lower than what we were paying East Texas for. So based upon the numbers, what they give us back will more than cover what we would need to pay to CareFlight to keep our employees covered.
Just to be clear, and gentlemen, if any of you have questions, please jump in here. Just to be clear, the notice that we received from East Texas Medical Center, their request, or almost a demand, is that they be released from the contract on February the 28th at midnight. Is that when this will take effect?
It was March 1st at 7 a.m.
March 1st at 7 a.m. So that's when CareFlight would take over the services from ET.
Yes, sir.
Jim?
I had a discussion with Mr. Schwartz. I wish he would explain, those of us that have a contract with them, in other words, my own personal agreement, if he'd explain how that is and what it costs, what we're going to do, what he's going to do for us citizens out there that have these agreements with East Texas.
I was going to ask Mr. Schwartz to come up and give us we met you, some of us have over the past, and I know you indicated you would do some things to make this transition as smooth as possible in the interim period.
Sure.
Certainly, I appreciate that, and I know the court does as well, but there are questions like that people have questions, wonder about.
Well, I'm honored to be the object of the longest agenda item in history. And I'm also honored to be first on the agenda because when you're in a job like mine and you appear before a lot of public entities, you can always tell where you stand by what their number is on the agenda, especially at night meetings when your number is 35.
Well, it was kind of forced upon us,
But not by us. It's not by us.
I understand.
We just stepped into the breach. Well, to answer the specific question about the members who are currently ETMC members, they'll be doing a pro rata refund, and CareFlight is, if you're an East Texas member currently, we're going to permit those people to join our program for $12 a year, which is a household rate. We only sell it by households. And that's really to compensate them for the inconvenience. The typical public rate for us is $49 a year per household, but we're going to do it for $12 for any citizen who's an East Texas member, because I would say they've been more than inconvenience. I think there's probably been a lot of concern about EMS itself, and I think that's probably made some people nervous, which was not of our making, but we still think that's the right thing to do. CareFlight's a nonprofit entity. It's overseen by Texas Health, which includes the Presbyterian Hospital here, Baylor Scott White, Methodist Health System in Dallas, JPS, the public system in Tarrant County, and Parkland, the public system in Dallas County. And I would say if there's one thing operationally that will make this very different, this is our home. We've been flying here for 36 years in this county, and we have a lot of resources in Dallas County. we run the 911 system in Gulf Springs and southeast Dallas County. And so for us to get additional resources into the county, whether it's a big emergency, God forbid, such as Waco or something like that, where we have more air and ground resources than any other entity, we're just on the other side of the county line, we have a lot of resources. And what that means on a day-to-day basis is, generally speaking, we would never permit more than one of our ambulances in the county to do a hospital transfer. We would send an ambulance out to Gulf Springs to get that patient and take them back in town, because defending the 911 and meeting the response time compliance is the single most important part of these agreements. You know, getting to the patients 90% of the time on the standards. You know, I've read all the other agreements, and the agreements themselves are confusing, first of all, and second of all, only care fights can stop care fights clock. The first responders who we rely on, which we should do, and it's appropriate to, they don't stop our clock, only we stop our clock when we get to that patient. And there'll be monthly reports given to Steve that will show every single response that we made and how we performed under the system. And from my perspective, we treat this, and this is what I believe, it could be my kid when I'm on the side of the road. And what is it that I would want, and that's what the standard is. We're very serious. We take this responsibility very seriously, because we're what stands in the life of many people. Terrible, terrible, terrible circumstances. It is unique to have 5 systems operate an entity like this. There are very few of these in the United States. This is the oldest one, in fact, in which multiple hospital systems got together because they didn't want to be competitors. They wanted to do this as an overall community project. Now, we only operate in North Texas, and unlike your previous entity, I'm not the regional manager, so I don't have all the technical knowledge, but I have the authority to commit care fight to things, and people who know me will tell you to turn up at the meetings, and I'm accessible, and you all have my card, and it includes my cell phone number, and if it's important enough to a constituent to call you at 10 o'clock at night, you better be calling me. I'll probably be asleep, but I'll pick the phone up. Probably not be too literate at 10 o'clock at night. But if it's important enough to that constituent that they have a concern, I want to know about it right now. I'm going to hear it 3 weeks later. So-and-so was upset about this or that. So I think we have a great rapport with your first responder communities. I think all the fire departments spend plenty of time with us, know our capabilities. We're providing medical direction to those that want it, and all the support that should be given to first responders. I could talk about care fight all day, but I'll stop and let you ask me any questions.
Where are the ambulances going to be stationed?
Exactly where they are now. Same place as they are now. And I'm not going to say that we might not ultimately adjust the location to facilitate the best possible response times, because that's something we study every month to see. Here in the city of Kaufman, at the moment, both trucks are on one station, and we have tended to want to separate those as a matter, because it's easier to get a bigger area within the time frames required. But we'll have to study this for a month or so to see how that was working out.
We're staying for the same number of ambulances, right?
Yes, but care
Two
fight
to one and
will provide whatever resources are required to maintain the commitment on the compliance. So in Johnson County, as an example, we're in our 11th year. We started out with 3 24s and a 12-hour truck.
Can you speak up?
I'm sorry.
Some of us around this table are a little.
And I've been around aviation all my life, and I don't hear so well either. At least my wife thinks I don't. Johnson County, 11 years ago, we started with 3 24-hour trucks and a 12-hour truck. Today, our peak deployment is 8, and that it has nothing. You are not contracting with us for the number of ambulances. You are contracting with us to meet the compliance and get to the patients in the time that we promised. Now, this happened very quickly, and Steve and I worked very hard on the language that's in the contract. And you are going to see that in the first 90 days there aren't going to be any penalties, because we have to be absolutely certain that the response times are reasonable. And the standard in the contract is that no response time can be faster than the 2 minutes from the dispatch that we have to get out of the station plus driving to the location at the speed limit. Most people don't know this, but the county ambulance business is one of the most hazardous professions in the country. And workers and patients and the public get killed from intersection crashes predominantly. And so we spend a lot of time and energy, won a lot of awards, and paid very close attention to the safety aspects of this operation. So you may see that there may be some adjustments in the third month if there are places that we can't physically get to without speeding, because speeding leads to crashes, and crashes lead to. The first rule in our business, which is a medical business ultimately, is to do no harm. And what we don't want to do is hurt anybody while we're trying to provide the service. And so I just point that out to you so everybody's cognizant of that. So we're going to see how this is going to work. I think the employees, over 90% of the employees who are here today for East Texas have come to work for Paraflight. We've been running classes for the last 2 weeks, giving them 40 hours. Not how to be a medic, but how does Paraflight do it? How does our documentation system work? And I think, and I've met every single employee, and I think that they are pleased with the fact that they're going to have a lot more support in doing their jobs because we have so many more assets available, which is an important key element of why this will work. And you'll run your RFP, and then you'll pick us, because to know us is to love us. And because we do the job, that's the reputation that we have. We're transparent, we respond. I'm not saying we won't make mistakes. I'm sure we will. It's a human organization. Any of them we know about we'll fix, and we won't make the same one twice. We'll make new ones, but we're not going to make the same exact mistakes twice. And this has been the most interesting month of the year, the 10 years I've been at Careflight, particularly with all the technical requirements to get the calls transferred from all the dispatch centers and to get agreements with the 2 cities that are separately contracted, both of which have already approved their situation as they see it.
And I believe you do have the 2 separate contracts, the city of Terrell and the city of Kaufman.
Yes, sir, we do. Yes, sir, we do.
And this may be in here, and I may have overlooked it, or you may have said it when I wasn't listening as closely as maybe I should have been. But at one time there was discussion about having some transfer ambulances if we had an issue with somebody needing to be transferred from a nursing home to a hospital, whatever. Is that still a possibility?
Sure.
We'll put as many resources as are needed to make the compliance. If we need more, we'll put more. If we find that, normally, if a nursing home calls 911, it's treated as a 911 call. If it's a scheduled doctor's appointment, then it's not a 911 call. And so, for the nursing homes as well as the hospital, the only way that we're going to take a 911 truck out of service to do a transfer out of the community, in other words, to go to the Metroplex, is we'd have to be at full strength and have no calls running at that moment. Otherwise, we're going to send trucks out to do those. And the nursing homes, if it's a doctor's appointment, typically will have told us 24 hours in advance that they've got somebody who's got to go to a scheduled appointment, so we'll bring extra resources in to deal with that. Because I'm not interested, other than what may happen in the first 90 days until we make sure we understand how this works. I'm not interested in coming out to meetings and trying to explain why we didn't make the compliance. That's the number one thing that we have to do. We have to get to these patients. Of course, we have air resources too, and we'll use them as necessary as is best for the patient. So
that was going to be my next question. In the other meeting that I attended when you were there with some of the fire departments, chiefs, and other first responders, you'd indicated that you were thinking about putting a helicopter in Kaufman County. And I understand that's not in this proposal.
Well, no, it's not, because the air side is federally regulated, and so We have helicopters in places where we do 911
Right.
service, but many places, but it's not a contracted deal, except the membership covers all of it.
Right.
Because the states are preempted. Where's the word? The states are preempted from the regulation of air transportation, which is what that is. But we're studying it very seriously, and I guess by the end of 90 days, I'll have a really clear idea of what I think is required and how to go about it.
So you have no doubt in your ability to, when we wake up Sunday morning at 7 o'clock, that we can call 911 and get them in.
Yes, sir. I have absolutely no, and I can assure you we won't be responding from Red Oak, nor will we be going to Red Oak or Ennis from Kaufman. I can assure you of that. And the reason is we have the resources. We have Dallas County, we have the biggest number of resources in our whole system right there. And we operate by maneuver all the time. I mean, in the West explosion, we had more air grounding assets in that explosion than any other entity. And we have the resources, and we don't hesitate to use them. And we put the patients first in all circumstances, whatever is best for that patient at that moment in time. And we just send the resources. If we need more trucks, we'll put them. We won't ask you for your permission, because A, we don't need it, and B, we do whatever is required. You need to be able to rely upon us to take care of these people. This is almost like national defense in a way for a local entity like this. So you can rely upon us, and if there's a problem, pick up the phone and call. Because we'll fix it. If there's a problem, somebody brings it, we want to know about it. We're not hiding.
Commissioner?
I have something I need Jim to address, and I need y'all to be aware of it. For the last 20 years or so, East Texas was transporting our inmates that needed medical attention at no cost. Now,
From our jail.
From our jail to Kaufman Presbyterian. And in my conversations with Jim, they probably should not have been doing that, and I would like for him to address that issue with y'all so you have a clear understanding.
So the contract requires that we comply with all federal statutes, regulations, and all state statutes and regulations and the terms of the agreement. 20 years ago, in rural areas, if a first responder was transported, you just didn't send the bill. If we flew a fireman 20 years ago, we just didn't send the bill. And, as an accommodation in those days, we would transport prisoners at no charge. But in this day and age, the county is referring patients to CareFlight by virtue of the fact that you run a 911 system and you transfer that call and request for service to us, which is how it works. If we provide an accommodation at a rate lower than the Medicare allowable rate, which is the federal rate, our compliance council tells us that we are in violation of the Medicare anti-kickback statute. So CareFlight's lowest rate, even to the hospitals that own it, is the Medicare allowable rate. Because I have no interest in taking a vacation in a place with high walls and barbed wire on top of it. And so that is a change. That's the lowest rate that we believe we're allowed to charge without putting everybody in jeopardy. And it wouldn't just be the ambulance provider under Part B. Under these rules, it would be the entity with whom you're dealing. And these things do carry potentially criminal sanctions. And so the contract includes a provision that all the entities that are covered through this contract, we bill the Medicare allowable rate. And that's just, it's a protection for both of us to make sure I'm just not interested in having discussions with the U.S. attorney as to, well, you gave them that, that's the inducement. We're giving you this for nothing, which is less than the federal government pays. And in return, you've given us all these patients. That is the classic definition of an inducement. And we just can't go there. We just can't. We can't do that. It's just too dangerous for everybody. The county, us, and those of us individually who are signers and authorizers we're individually subject to this. And you guys are involved in public service, and in a way we are too, except we're not elected. And we just have to do what's right under the rules.
What is that rate?
Oh,
Or do we know what it'd be for a prisoner?
Depending on the level of care they've got to give.
It doesn't take that.
It could be anywhere from probably 300 up to 900.
yeah, my guess is that it's mostly going to be the ALS emergency rate, and I don't have a sheet with me, but my recollection is that's 300, 350, somewhere around there. You won't have too much mileage. Your jail is around here somewhere, right?
Yes.
And so there's a base rate. We're like a taxi cab, you know, and puts it down. That's called our base rate. That's the same depending on the level of care. And then there's mileage, and you don't have very many miles. So,
How much do the memberships cost?
so for
Well, for our employees as well as anybody sitting out there.
So the highest public rate is $49 a year per household. The rate in the contract agreement was $12 per employee per year, and that includes all members of their household, except anybody covered by Medicaid, which is excluded by law. So $12 per year. If you're an East Texas member and you're having to get a refund from them, it's $12 a year. I suspect there'll be some amount of group and water system agreements in a short period of time, and those rates again are $12 a year.
That's a very intriguing thing to me, that the water system.
Right.
That might have lots of possibilities.
Yeah, the way that one works is it's a.
So do you have an inmate, an inmate membership?
Great, Don.
Well, we have had agreements with jails, and I'm happy to discuss that. I want to know that, you know, the average population.
One household, right? $12.
That's a good one.
They all live in Kaufman County.
It is one now.
Well, that's the way, if it's feasible, we'll be able to look at it.
Yeah, just to kind of let you know, that's why I want to make sure Steve brought that up. Because we called the ambulances last year about 46, 47 times.
Last year we called 43 times, transported 40.
So that's, we're looking at some money there. I just want to make sure you're aware of that. And most of the time, we try to transport ourselves. We'll try.
Where you can.
How many did you say? 46?
They called them 43 times and transported 40.
For the whole year?
From the jail.
From
the whole year?
2014.
For the whole year.
All
Okay,
for the
that's
whole
what
year.
I thought you said in 4 weeks. That's it.
No.
So, I mean, you know, at $300, that's 12,000. So I think the range was 12 to 15,000 is kind of the range of how it will fall out. And I'm sure it didn't have it in your budget and in your plan, but in the scheme of things, it's a very small number to keep us all compliant with our local statutes.
Okay. Mr. O'Phil, raise your hand.
Oh, I was just asking Mr. Huey, did he know the statistics on how many of those transports went to the Kaufman Presbyterian Hospital and how many might have incurred additional mileage charges? So we were just working numbers in my mind, and it looks like about a $12,000 potential budget impact, Judge.
Do all of them go to the Presbyterian?
Majority went here. There's been a couple times we've had to transport them to Dallas. Just off the top of my head, I remember about 3 or 4 last year. That was
That's a lot, very many.
very few. And then you've got to remember also, we've got one that's probably going to come up pretty soon when he sends it to PDC if they're it's going to wind up going to PDC, and we don't have an ambulance again. So we'll have to try that.
We're going to have to snake him in the ambulance?
Yes.
You have transport units for that, right?
Oh, yeah. You would have
We can probably get a better rate with the
Can't
regular
they
transport.
collect from his social security?
All right.
I just go, you know, in this contract, y'all will come and provide the commissioner's court with that monthly report. So this will help us a lot with,
Right, they're gonna give it to Steve, and then, and Steve will let me know if you all wish us to appear. I would tell you that probably in the 3.5 months from now, after we've done all this analysis, would probably be a good time for us to come out and show you exactly, these are all runs, this is what we jointly agreed to based on, it was 12 miles, the speed limit is 60, that means it's basically 12 minutes plus, or whatever it is, whatever it comes out to, I think that would be a good.
And you're entering into basically the same contract with Ellis County, is that correct? Or have you?
Basically, Ellis County, their commissioners approved a simple transfer of the agreement. And I know this is hard for anybody to imagine, but lawyers have different views of things, in my experience, and their view was we can just accept the assignment. So that's what we did. So
We try to make things harder around here.
Yeah.
Well, and I made it even harder with the response time part of it.
yes, but
And that's what attachment one is, right?
pardon me? That's attachment one. That's attachment one. That's the part of the contract that Steve and I signed on behalf of the two entities. And then if we decide that jointly that on a reasonable basis that these numbers have to be adjusted, and we're going to start working on that after early in April once we have 1 month's worth of data. Because we're very concerned about a couple of places that there's no surprise in this. There's some places here that aren't so easy to get to, and the populations are thin, and so we'll work together to try to figure out what has to be done there. We just don't want to be, we just can't be in a situation where the requirement to respond is faster than it can be done with the speed limit. That is, we have absolute rules at CareFlight to prevent death and mayhem, that the speed limit is the maximum speed that we go at. There's a lot of due regard in the state, but the due regard ends at the moment of impact in the crash, and we're not. I've buried 2 coworkers since I've been at CareFlight who were involved in an accident that is a catastrophic failure of a part due to a mistake in its manufacturing. Nothing they did wrong, nothing was missed on a pre-flight. The part failed within its life limit. That's an accident. A crash is you go 80 on a road that's got a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's reasonable to believe you can foresee that something bad can happen if your front tire blows out or whatever happens. And we're in the business of saving lives, not taking them. And that means that we absolutely must operate consistent with the traffic standards. And we're a little unusual in that, but I'm not interested in varying it.
Basically, I guess it's gonna be the same contract, except for you're gonna improve on the
Yes.
time. And we're gonna cut out the free jail ride.
And this is a really important factor, only CareFlight stops CareFlight's time clock. Your prior contract said that ETMC's clock stopped when the first responder showed up, which I appreciate that, and many times the first responders will get there first. But our responsibility is our responsibility, and we don't pawn it off on somebody else. I mean, that to me was you would see places where they had an ambulance 15 miles away and the response time was 2 minutes. I'm thinking they must have some jet-powered vehicle that sprouts wings or something.
Like in the city of Florida recently, they got on the scene, correct me if I'm wrong, Chief Townsend, it was 45 minutes before the ambulance ever showed up, and you wound up having to get somebody out of Mesquite.
We've had 2 instances of that, yes, sir.
Yeah.
So that's going to help a lot, because even though first responders get there and can administer care, a lot of times that patient's ultimate conclusion rests in them getting to a hospital
As quickly as possible.
as quickly as possible. So if it takes 45 minutes for an ambulance to get there, then even though they've cared for them in the short term, it doesn't help them long term.
And in a situation like that, we're half likely to send a helicopter. And sometimes we'll send a helicopter and charge a ground rate. If we do it for our own business reasons, the patient isn't really a terrible trauma, but we want to make the compliance, and the system is completely, we can't help it. There's 6 calls going at one time in the county, which then we're going to do whatever we have to do to get to these patients as fast as possible. And believe me, we get a helicopter here, even from Dallas, and in the morning, 10, 12 minutes, something like that. So, it's a sentinel event if it takes us 45 minutes to get an ambulance to an emergency patient. A sentinel event that would be reportable within our system as a complete failure.
I know several towns, several of them.
Where are your helicopters currently based for our area, and who has the authority to request?
Anybody who's a first responder, ask for a helicopter, they're gonna get it, they're gonna get it right now. There's no, well, no, or no, the ambulance has to come and look first. No. Our sort of internal saying is, you call, we haul. And we'll talk about it after the fact. You really called us for a broken ankle? Really? Probably, but exactly, that's not gonna happen. You guys know what the deal is. So, you call, and it's the same frequency, it's the same radio, and then all else fails, you use the cell phone on the truck, and they're gonna dispatch it, because we believe you all know what the standards are, and you're operating within them, and we're gonna send you the helicopter, and we're gonna send it right now. And could be, the ground ambulance gets there before, and says, we really don't need this help, this is just a broken leg, we're fine, and the helicopter just goes back. But what we're not gonna do is wait, because the golden hour is the standard into the trauma center, which is 60 minutes, but 30 is better than 60. I'm not much on math, but that much I know. Half hour is better than the whole hour, and the only way to do that is to dispatch these helicopters. And if you have a system, a logistical breakdown, you have to remember that this ambulance is 50% logistics and 50% medical care. Either area can either increase the likelihood of a good outcome or decrease it. You can have the best medical care. You have a wreck in the intersection and the ambulance goes on its side. You can have the best medical care. Patients on there for a cardiac, and now they have a cardiac and a trauma, does not make it more likely they're going to succeed. So we spend a lot of time trying to make sure the logistics as well as the medical care are of the highest quality in the country. And that's something that a lot of people just haven't recognized. Because you have to realize ambulances, school buses, and hearses are exempt from all the safety regulations of manufacturing vehicles in the United States. This is the only developed country that has no safety standards for the manufacture of ambulances. This is a serious problem, which will never get fixed because Congress would have to change it. There are no standards for these three kinds of vehicles. And it's offensive to me that we're lumped in with the undertakers, even if they're in the room. It's offensive to me because what we do is the opposite of that. And I've only been on one ambulance ride in my life, which was 51 years ago. I fell off a horse at a farm where we lived, and parents weren't home, walked to the doctor, called for the ambulance, which in those days was the undertaker because they had a convertible. Some of you aren't old enough to remember this, but they had what was called a Cadillac convertible. So it wasn't a convertible top, and then either the coffin went there or the patient went there. So the ambulance took 30 minutes to get there, 45 minutes to go 30 miles on two-lane roads, and the doctor puts me in there with the undertaker, and I look up and I go, now, we're going to the hospital, not the morgue, right? And he laughed, the guy driving in the black suit, he really wasn't happy very much. So that's why they're all exempt. And it's a terrible thing, but that's how it is.
I'm going to give every commissioner, if you have any other questions. Steve, did you have something?
No, I didn't have a question. I was just going to say that I know in pointing up back, one of the things we did was y'all came and picked somebody up just because of the traffic was the situation. It didn't happen necessarily, but they wanted to make sure the young man that got hurt in the head trauma, so they picked him up and took him straight to.
Right.
So I know you're working in a timely fashion. Everything's important.
Yeah, and in the Metroplex, during rush hour, sometimes we find patients who wouldn't fly otherwise because you just can't get them. You just can't get them where they have to go because the traffic is 20 miles an hour. So
because they didn't know how bad it was.
Exactly.
They needed.
We always default to the conservative side, which is we'd rather fly somebody who didn't need it than not fly somebody and turns out they did need it and you have a bad outcome as a result. That's it.
Jimmy, do you have anything?
No, I think it's well covered.
Yeah.
I heard his presentation last night at the city council meeting.
All right, Jack, I'm going to ask you a question as we wind this thing down, unless we have other questions. After assuming we sign this contract, what will be the next step that we will need to take as far as your shop is concerned?
They should, they've been included in,
So you will start it, I guess, more or less, it'll start fairly soon, just so we have some certainty with this on down the way.
we definitely don't want to wait till last minute.
Yeah.
We start now and we give ourselves plenty of time.
Okay. I just, I think we should move as, not just for the sake of speed, but I mean, the sooner we get this finally resolved, I think it'd be good. Mr. Oldfield?
Thank you, Judge. Do we have any purchase order requirement for the jail to be able to call on the 3rd and get service?
I don't know that.
You know, it's
I guess it has to,
well,
you have to appeal for an ambulance, right?
right. In other words, so again, was there anything we need to do
That's something we need
to authorize?
Not for us,
We'll work out.
not for us. I mean, you call, we haul.
Right, yeah, and I was just thinking that the internal.
Jack, that also falls underneath emergency, so, I mean.
We want as little paperwork as is necessary, because we don't want to make anybody's job more complicated. So, you call us, we're going to haul, and we're going to send you a bill from Medicare, I will rate, you're going to pay it.
We can give you one bill for the whole thing.
Great.
Great.
All right. Anybody have any other questions?
I'll make a motion to enter into this contract.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Shane that we agree to the contract that has been presented after hearing from Mr. Schwartz. Do I have a second? Mr. Phillips seconds the motion. Any other discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed. Need a motion to adjourn? Mr. Allen makes that motion. Phillips seconds that motion. All in favor say aye.
I don't know if that'd be smooth.
One of these, let me know.